There are stories that shake us to our core, that make us question how someone could become so disconnected from humanity. This is one of those stories. Today, we're examining the chilling case of Israel Keyes, a man whose crimes were marked by meticulous planning, cold calculation, and a level of organization that terrified investigators across the United States. Before we dive deeper into this disturbing journey, I want to connect with you. Where are you watching from right now? Are you listening during your commute at home, maybe late at night when these stories hit differently? Drop your location in the comments, and if this content is valuable to you, please hit that like button. It helps more people understand these important cases and keeps this conversation going. Israel Keyes was born on January 7th, 1978 in Richmond, Utah, the second of 10 children in a family that would eventually drift far from conventional society. His parents, Heidi and John Jeffrey Keyes, initially belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but they abandoned their faith shortly after Israel's birth. When he was just 5 years old, the family made a dramatic move to an isolated cabin in Colville, Washington, a decision that would shape the trajectory of his early life in profound and disturbing ways. The cabin where young Israel grew up had no electricity, no running water. 10 children and 2 adults lived in a single-room structure, existing on the margins of society. The family attended churches with white supremacist ideology, specifically those associated with Christian identity movements. Israel was homeschooled until he was 11, growing up in an environment that investigators would later describe as potentially abusive. His father's influence loomed large, and authorities suspect that abuse within the home may have contributed to the sadistic tendencies that would later define Israel's criminal life. Even as a child, warning signs emerged. Young Israel hunted animals, but not just for survival or sport. He tortured a cat, he shot at live deer, he stole firearms, he started fires. These weren't childhood pranks or youthful mistakes. These were indicators of a mind developing without empathy, without the natural human capacity for compassion that most of us take for granted. By his teenage years, Israel stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, physically imposing and skilled in carpentry. He could build cabins with his hands, demonstrating technical capability and intelligence, yet he remained socially isolated, disconnected from peers, drifting further into his own dark internal world. The family eventually moved to Smyrna, Maine, settling in an Amish community where they produced maple syrup. It was during these formative years, between ages 18 and 19, that Israel made a conscious rejection of Christianity. He declared himself an atheist and developed an interest in Satanism, even planning what he would later describe as a ritual murder. This wasn't teenage rebellion or philosophical exploration. This was the deliberate construction of a worldview that would justify unspeakable acts. Around 1997 or 1998, Israel committed his first known violent crime, one that revealed both his capacity for brutality and, disturbingly, a level of self-awareness about his own behavior. Along the Deschutes River in Oregon, he sexually assaulted a teenage girl between the ages of 14 and 18, threatening her with a knife, but he let her live. Later, he would tell investigators he released her because of cowardice, and he swore to himself that he would never fail again. Think about what that means. He didn't see letting her live as mercy or as a moment of conscience breaking through. He saw it as a failure, a weakness to overcome. That single statement reveals the fundamental absence of humanity that characterized everything that would follow. On July 9, 1998, Israel Keyes enlisted in the United States Army, serving as a specialist in the 25th Infantry Division. He was stationed at Fort Lewis and Fort Hood, and he deployed on missions to the Sinai in Egypt. He even went through ranger training, demonstrating physical capability and discipline. But military service didn't reform him or redirect his impulses. Instead, it provided him with skills, with travel opportunities, and with a veneer of normalcy that would later help him move through society undetected. During his time in service, he attempted to rape a prostitute in Egypt and a student in Israel. These weren't crimes of opportunity born from a moment of lost control. These were consistent with a pattern already established, a pattern of viewing other human beings as objects to be used and discarded. Keyes received an honorable discharge in 2001 after an arrest for driving under the influence. He returned to civilian life and settled in Near Bay, Washington, where he began a relationship with a Native American woman named Tammy Hawkins. Around 2001, they had a daughter named Lainey. By all external appearances, Israel Keyes was building a normal life. He worked as an independent carpenter. He was a father. He had relationships. People who knew him during this period described him as competent, reliable, even friendly. This is what makes cases like this so unsettling. There was no obvious monster. There was a man who could function in society, hold conversations, maintain employment and raise a child, all while harboring impulses that most of us cannot begin to comprehend. Israel Keyes eventually separated from Tammy and entered into a relationship with Kimberly Anderson, a nurse, a relationship that continued until approximately 2011. In 2007, he founded Keyes Construction in Alaska, establishing himself as a successful businessman. He owned property in Constable, New York, including a cabin. He suffered from seasonal depression, drank heavily, and occasionally threatened suicide. But these struggles, while serious, don't explain or excuse what he was simultaneously planning and executing. Keyes studied serial killers. He watched violent films. He listened to heavy metal bands like Megadeth. He researched Ted Bundy and Robert Hansen, but he was particularly interested in killers who were never caught. He wasn't just indulging dark fantasies. He was conducting research, learning from the mistakes of others, building a methodology designed specifically to avoid detection. This level of premeditation separates Israel Keyes from many other killers. He didn't act on impulse. He didn't lose control. He made deliberate choices over and over again, choices that prioritized his desires over the lives and dignity of other human beings. His method was terrifyingly sophisticated. Israel Keyes created what he called kill kits, waterproof buckets containing weapons, silencers, ammunition, gloves, Drano to dissolve bodies, and condoms for the sexual assaults he planned to commit. He buried these kits in remote locations, places like reservoirs in New York and Alaska, creating an infrastructure for murder that he could access whenever opportunity arose. He financed these preparations through bank robberies, including a robbery in Tupper Lake, New York in 2009 and another in Texas. He traveled using rental cars, paid in cash, avoided using cell phones in ways that could be traced, and deliberately chose victims with no connection to him whatsoever. There was no profile, there was no type, there was only opportunity and isolation. Keyes preferred strangulation as his method of killing. When investigators asked him why, his answer was chilling in its honesty. He said he enjoyed watching the consciousness leave his victim's eyes. He found pleasure in that moment of transition from life to death, in the power he held over another person's existence. This wasn't about anger or revenge or even sexual gratification alone. This was about control, about reducing human beings to objects existing solely for his satisfaction. He did, however, have one rule that he mentioned to investigators. He avoided targeting children and parents, allegedly because of his own daughter. Even this boundary, which might seem like evidence of some remaining humanity, was ultimately self-serving. It wasn't about protecting others. It was about maintaining his ability to rationalize his actions and continue his relationship with his child. Between 2001, when he left the army, and 2012, when he was finally captured, Israel Keyes confessed to committing at least 11 murders across at least 7 states. He also admitted to 20 to 30 home invasions, multiple arsons, and numerous robberies. The true scope of his crimes may never be fully known. He was careful, methodical, and he operated across such wide geographic areas that connecting cases to him remains challenging even today, years after his death. 3 victims have been explicitly confirmed through Keyes' own confessions and supporting evidence. On June 8, 2011, in Essex, Vermont, he committed a home invasion that resulted in the deaths of William Scott Currier, age 49, and his wife, Lorraine Simony Currier, age 55. Keyes broke into their home, shot Bill, and raped and strangled Lorraine. He disposed of their bodies in an abandoned building, and despite extensive searches, their remains have never been recovered. The Curriers were living their lives, secure in their home, when Israel Keyes decided their existence was secondary to his desires. There was no connection between them. They didn't know him. They couldn't have prevented what happened. They were simply in a place at a time when a predator was hunting. The crime that ultimately led to Keyes' capture was the abduction and murder of Samantha Tesla Koenig, an 18-year-old woman working at a coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. On February 1, 2012, Keyes kidnapped Samantha from her workplace. He raped her, strangled her, and dismembered her body, disposing of her remains in Matanuska Lake. But Keyes wasn't finished. In a display of depravity that shocked even experienced investigators, he retrieved Samantha's body, positioned it to appear alive, placed a recent newspaper beside it, and took a photograph. He then sent this photograph to her family as part of a ransom demand for $30,000. Samantha Koenig was already dead when her family received that image and that demand. Israel Keyes was extorting money from grieving parents using their daughter's corpse as a prop. The ransom money became the thread that investigators needed. When Keyes used Samantha's debit card, the transactions created a digital trail. On March 13, 2012, police stopped him in Lufkin, Texas, initially for a minor traffic violation, driving slightly above the speed limit. When they searched his vehicle, they found the ransom money and Samantha's card. It was over. The meticulous planning, the buried kill kits, the interstate travel, all of it unraveled because of a debit card and a traffic stop. Keyes was extradited to Alaska, where he confessed to killing Samantha Koenig and the couriers. Over approximately 40 hours of interrogation, he provided details about his methods, his travels, and his philosophy. The FBI began the massive task of mapping his movements between 1997 and 2012, tracking rental cars, hotel stays, and travel patterns. In 2013, they released interrogation videos and photographs of the kill kits to the public, hoping someone might recognize details that could connect Keyes to unsolved cases. Before we continue with the rest of this disturbing investigation, I want to check in with you again. If you're still here, still engaged with this difficult subject matter, thank you for caring enough to understand these cases. Where are you joining us from? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button. These stories matter, and your engagement helps ensure they reach people who need to understand the realities of violent crime and its impact on communities. Keyes initially cooperated with investigators, but his cooperation came with conditions that revealed his continuing need for control even after capture. He wanted a quick execution. He wanted to avoid media attention. He wanted to protect his family from public scrutiny. When media coverage of his case intensified, he stopped cooperating entirely. The flow of information that might have brought closure to families of other victims simply ended because Israel Keyes decided it should end. In May 2012, while in custody, Keyes attempted to escape using pencil shavings, fashioned into a makeshift key. Even facing murder charges, he was still planning, still scheming, still trying to manipulate his environment to his advantage. While in prison, Keyes wrote what he called an ode to murder, glorifying killing and revealing the depth of his detachment from human empathy. He drew 11 skulls on his cell wall using his own blood, a number that investigators believe may represent his total victim count. He also drew a pentagram, continuing to embrace the dark symbolism he had adopted decades earlier. These weren't the actions of someone experiencing remorse. These were the actions of someone who remained, until the very end, proud of what he had done. On December 1, 2012, Israel Keyes committed suicide in his cell at the Anchorage prison. He cut his wrists and strangled himself using bedsheets, having somehow obtained an illegal razor blade. His trial had been scheduled for March 2013. Victims' families would never get their day in court. Questions would remain forever unanswered. Keyes, in his final act, took control one last time, determining the terms of his own ending rather than facing the judgment of society. But the investigation didn't end with his death. Beyond the 3 confirmed murders, investigators believe Keyes was responsible for at least 8 additional homicides. He himself claimed 7 or 8 other victims, and the 11 skulls he drew suggest that number might be accurate. Deborah Feldman, a 48-year-old woman, disappeared on April 8, 2009 in Hackensack, New Jersey. Investigators suspect she may have been buried near Tupper Lake, New York, where Keyes had committed a bank robbery. Her case remains open, her family still waiting for answers. Julie Marie Harris was just 12 years old when she was killed in 1996 in Colville, Washington, the same area where the Keyes family lived. Investigators questioned him about Julie's death, but he denied involvement. For Julie's family, that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. One significant case involves a victim known for years only as Lewis County Jane Doe. Her remains were discovered on April 7, 2011, in Morton, Washington. In 2022, DNA technology finally revealed her identity, though her name has not been released publicly. She died between 2005 and 2006, and the location and timeline align with Keyes' known presence in Washington. In 2024, her former boyfriend confessed to her killing, though investigators have not entirely ruled out a connection to Keyes. Keyes confessed to a double homicide in Washington between 2001 and 2005, killing a man through blunt force trauma and a woman by strangulation. He also mentioned another murder in the Lake Crescent area between 2005 and 2006. 5 potential victims in Washington remain under investigation. In 2007, Boca Raton, Florida, experienced horrifying murders. Randy Gorenberg, 52, was kidnapped and murdered in March. In December, Nancy Bochicchio, 47, and her daughter Joey, just 7 years old, were shot to death. Records confirm Keyes was in Florida during this period, and physical descriptions showed similarities to him, but investigators have not definitively linked him to these murders. Other cases with potential connections include James Tidwell, 58, who disappeared in February 2012 in Texas, and Giovanna Tyler, 29, from Tacoma, Washington, who vanished in 2004. In 2023, a remarkable development brought new hope. Podcasters working on true crime bullsh and Somewhere in the Pines provided the FBI with evidence of a potential kill kit cache in Laplace, Louisiana, based on information that aligned with a map found on Keyes's computer. This was the first significant physical evidence connected to the case since 2012, and searches were ongoing as of the latest updates. The FBI continues to solicit tips through their hotline at 1-800-CALL-FBI, particularly focused on New York, Washington, and Florida. Every piece of information could be the detail that finally brings answers to a family that has waited years to know what happened to their loved one. Israel Keyes represents something that challenges our fundamental assumptions about recognizing danger. He wasn't obviously troubled. He maintained employment, relationships, and parental responsibilities. He moved through society, interacting with people every day who had no idea what he was capable of. This reality is uncomfortable because it means evil can wear an ordinary face, but we cannot let that reality paralyze us with fear. Instead, we must recognize that communities keep each other safe through awareness, through communication, through systems that investigate thoroughly. We honor victims not by living in fear, but by refusing to let their stories be forgotten. Israel Keyes made choices. Every single step of his life involved decisions he made, knowing they would cause suffering. He studied other killers and learned from them. He planned meticulously and executed those plans with cold precision. He is responsible for his actions, not his childhood, not his family, not society. Israel Keyes chose to become what he became, and he continued choosing it for more than a decade. The families of his victims did not choose this. They did not choose to have their loved ones taken by a man who saw human beings as objects. They did not choose to spend years wondering what happened, searching for answers, hoping for closure that might never come. They deserve our compassion, our support, and our continued commitment to finding the truth. If you have information about Israel Keyes' travels or activities between 1997 and 2012, particularly in New York, Washington, Florida, Alaska, Vermont, or Louisiana, please contact the FBI. Your information might be the piece that finally brings a family the answers they desperately need. Thank you for staying with this difficult story. These cases matter because the victims matter, because truth matters, because justice matters. If this content has value for you, please share it, like it, and continue the conversation. Where are you from and what case would you like to see covered next? Your engagement makes this work possible.